Okay. All right, everybody. We are here with another Public Relations Declassified live stream, and we're going to go ahead and open up with what I thought was an awesome story about doing double duty, right? Doing good while earning publicity. And so, what I'm talking about here was something that I saw over the holidays. This happened just a little bit before Christmas, and a guy by the name of Marcus Lemonius. You guys may have heard of him. He's the CEO of Camping World, and he was also the host of a TV show called The Prophet that was on a while back. Now, he's also kind of a self-proclaimed philanthropist, and he put his money where his mouth is over the holidays. And he posted what I thought was an absolutely awesome tweet. He was talking about granting people's wishes for Christmas. Now, predictably, a lot of people reached out to him as a result of this. And what he did was he basically put in a hashtag. And I can't really read it right now on my screen here. It's a bit small. But he put in a specific hashtag. And the idea was everybody on X who wanted to benefit from this, what they would do is they would post something, post what it is they wanted, what they needed with that hashtag in it, and he would grant the wishes, right? And this was really cool because it ended up resulting in not only thousands and thousands of people getting what they wanted for Christmas. And this was things like, plane tickets to go see, somebody who was serving in the military and couldn't make it home. Or, somebody had lost their job and wasn't able to get their kids presents for Christmas, things like that. Lots of good was done as a result of this, but it also created a tremendous amount of publicity for Marcus and his personal brand and his companies. So this is just a great example of some of the things that can happen when you're doing good in a large scale way. It creates not only a lot of publicity, but it also puts good into the world. And, I think that kind of thing is really beneficial because we need more people doing more good things. So when you get a chance to do something like this, absolutely jump on it. Don't go overboard as far as trying to promote it, trying to make it, hey, look at me. He just got out here and did it. And it was just a thing that he did. He didn't sit there and brag about what he was doing. He didn't say, hey, look at me. Hey, I'm going to do all this stuff for all these people. He didn't go and try and get the media to cover it. He just did good. And it resulted in a ton of coverage as a result of that. So this is a tremendous impact for you, but it has to be authentic and it has to be about the cause. It can't be about you and how awesome you think you are or anything like that. Just if you're going to do something like this, make it authentic, make it about the people that you're trying to serve, and just genuinely focus on doing good. And as a result of that, the publicity will come from that. So that's what I wanted to touch on that. And then also just one more thing to add on that is keep it simple. You don't have to make it overly complicated. Now, I want to jump into kind of a little breaking news side of things here. There's some really interesting things that have happened on the social media front. So you guys may have heard about some of the stuff that's been going on with Meta. This includes Facebook and Instagram. And for anybody, I see Annie just popped in here a little bit about Trish too. You guys are going to definitely resonate with what I'm about to share. I know you guys have been hammered by Facebook with some of the crap that they've been pulling over the years. Anyone who knows me knows that I've been suspended and banned numerous times, all kinds of crazy things. But there was a really interesting story that broke. I think this all just came out yesterday, if I remember correctly. It might have been a day before. But
all right, buckle up. We got a Fox News alert moments ago. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, announcing they are changing their policies to focus on free speech. CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying this.
We're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US.
Now, for anybody who's been impacted by this, you know how big of a deal this is. Personally, I've been suspended. I've had my account flat out banned. The account that I've got now is actually one that after my account got banned last time, I had to try and create numerous accounts over the years. And I think it took probably close to a year, maybe a little bit longer before I was able to get another one up that kind of got past them. But we're constantly seeing nonsense like this. And in fact, Annie, I don't know if you're in a spot where you're able to pop in here for a second, but I know you guys had some issues with Facebook where you guys were having some issues with the ad account because you guys were locked out of your stuff. Chrissy, if she's able to pop in, just let me know and we'll pull her up for a second. But, there's a lot of factors to this. And I actually just found out recently, by the way, that Facebook employed an astronomical number of these so-called fact checkers, right? Over 40,000 of them. So this is over with. This means you're not going to have stupid stuff happening where your account is getting banned. I've seen situations where, your account would get banned or suspended, and now all of a sudden this group that you've spent all these years and all this money building to build the audience, and most of that money, by the way, is usually paid directly to Facebook. But now you can't access it. You can't post in there. You can't leverage what you've built. They just jerk the rug out from underneath you, right? So this is an absolutely absurd situation in the first place. But because of some of the political shifts, and when I say political shifts, I'm not talking about politicians themselves. I'm talking about societal. Because of that, and then also because of what's been happening with X, also known as Twitter back in the day, there's a lot of changes to other platforms now happening. So, the big problem that I see as still a risk, though, is they are using AI to kind of do some kind of content moderation. So I'm going to pop up a couple of examples here that I found kind of interesting. We had some old Facebook accounts that we had still had admin access to. We had been managing for clients over the years. And I was looking at one that we got. I'm not sure if you guys are able to read that up here on the screen, but this was an account that got shut down, supposedly for child sexual exploitation. And behind here, you'll see the image that they're saying is that type of material. It's actually just the company logo, right? We had a few more of them, but basically ridiculous stuff like that. Or here was one where I was actually suspended. I think it was for 30 days for talking about my truck's transmission braking. Use the word tranny, which we've always used, right? So this type of stuff stops, which is going to be really good in the fact that you're not going to have to worry about this stuff happening where you all of a sudden are suspended and now you can't run your Facebook page or your Facebook groups or manage your Facebook ads. I've heard of people who their account gets suspended and then their ads just continue to run, and the ads aren't performing well. They're not converting. Nothing's happening, but they can't go in and turn them off because of Facebook's stupid policies. So this is thankfully coming to an end, and it's very, very much needed. Also want to talk about what's going on over here with TikTok. Now, there's been a bunch of talk about TikTok being banned over the last few years. It kind of flares back up every so often. But recently, Kevin O'Leary popped up and is putting in a bid to buy the platform. So this is something I predicted back in December, and I've said it a few different times over the years as this has happened, but I've said that it was never going to get banned. That's not going to happen. Well, here we are again. Kevin O'Leary is now putting in a bid to buy it. Bottom line, TikTok's not going anywhere. Now, I will say TikTok is still a crap platform for a lot of reasons, but there's a lot you can do with it. I know some of the people who are on here with us today have seen some of the experiments I ran with it, where we had created a kind of a test account with a strategy that I had developed. And within the span of, I think it was about 6 days, we had set out to do an experiment over the course of a week. And by day 6, we had hit over 1,000 followers on that account, and the engagement was pretty high. It was great. So it can be a very useful platform, but there's a lot of privacy issues with it. So just be careful how you're using it. One of the things I'm looking at doing is actually putting it off to kind of like an isolated device where there's nothing else really on that device, and TikTok is the only thing there, and that's the only place it's used, right? So this is still going to be a great platform to use. It does provide great reach. There are some benefits and drawbacks to it. We'll probably dig more into that in a future episode. And I'm probably going to do a broader social media episode as well, because there's some really interesting things we've been doing with X as well lately. All right, so next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the types of content that show a journalist that you're an expert that they should feature. Now, this is really important because when a journalist is going to feature you, they want to know that you're an expert, right? So they don't actually care about your content. They don't, they're not going through your blog posts and they're not going through your social media posts saying, hey, this is really fascinating. What they're looking at is they're trying to determine if you are a legitimate expert. Because what happens is if they feature you and you're not, then that hurts their reputation and potentially puts their job at risk. And with the chaos in the media today, that's a really big risk for them because there's so many cases where journalists are just getting laid off en masse. So they want to avoid that at all costs. So this is why it's so important to really put together some great content that's going to demonstrate that you're an expert. Now, I'm going to break out a couple of examples here and show you like the types of content and then show you why they work, show you how the people have used this content to really create a lot of publicity. And we'll take some questions and answers on that as well. So one of the ones I want to cover here is from my friend Carol Roth. Now, if you guys watch much news, you probably see her all the time. She's one of the smartest people, especially when it comes to anything financial related. And one of the things that she's been covering lately is the BOI, or the Corporate Transparency Act. So with this particular situation, the type of content we're going to be looking at here is an analysis, right? So she's analyzing this law, this regulation, and how it's affecting business owners, or rather how it will affect business owners. So this is a tweet that I actually just came across today. She's been talking about this BOI since the beginning of its inception. Now, I think by now, most everybody knows about this law. If not, you definitely need to talk to your accountant about it because the penalties for it are outrageous and the government really didn't notify anybody about it. So if you're not in compliance with this law, then the penalties are something like 500 and change a day. So it gets pretty ridiculous. So she came out early and she was analyzing the law, talking about what it is, how it's going to impact business owners, what's wrong with it, all of this stuff. And, as of today, I saw this tweet when I first popped into X this morning, and she's talking about some things that are going on. But here's the cool thing. If you look at what she's replying to, that's a tweet where somebody's asking her about it. Now, in the past, if the government was, okay, so Chrissy is saying that Facebook's not showing some of the stuff that we're doing here, streaming. So if you guys are not seeing, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. If you guys are not seeing whatever Facebook's not showing, you guys can pop over to X, pop over to, we're also streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn as well. So if you guys are having any problems seeing this, go ahead and pop into any of those platforms. All right, so jumping back to Carol. In the past, if there was a situation like this, where there's this regulation, this law, what are you going to do? Well, you're typically going to reach out to your elected officials. You're going to reach out to maybe your accountant, whatever. Carol has basically become the de facto expert on this. And everybody in the media, everybody on social media is reaching out to her to ask about this, right? So this is the kind of thing that can really cement you in as an absolute authority. And, as somebody who constantly covers financial topics, this really bolsters her authority status, which was already quite high. So that's a great type of content. You take something that's going on in your industry and you analyze it, break it down. How is it going to affect people? What do they need to do to protect themselves or to take advantage of the situation or whatever is going on there? Okay. We're also going to talk about predictions. So this was one that I did a while back. I wrote an article titled "iSearch: How AI Will Transform the Landscape of SEO." Now, back in the day, I was very heavy into SEO. I was listed by Search Engine Journal as one of the top 140 SEO professionals in the world, in fact. And I wrote this article back in 2017. And basically everything that you guys see going on in Google right now was all predicted in this article. But I wrote this. This article was very in-depth. It was very comprehensive. And I talked about exactly what I thought was going to happen as a result of AI starting to play a larger role in search. And a lot of people found that really fascinating. It led to a lot of publicity. I got a lot of podcast interviews. I got a lot of features in other publications. I mean, there was probably hundreds of individual pieces of publicity that were generated as a result of this one article. And that's because I took a very deep prediction of what was going to happen based on this. I broke it down in a very, very technical way. And, what I was talking about was very advanced for the time, but now everything that's going on in Google is exactly what was outlined in that article. So if you've got the insight to understand what's going on in your industry and how things are going to evolve, this is a great opportunity for you to create some publicity, because people want to be at that cutting edge. They want to be the ones who are talking about what's going on, what's going to happen. And when you can start to give them pieces like that, and then they can cite that and then share, their insight on it. Or if it's, maybe they're an industry person, right? Maybe they're writing about it in a trade pub. They definitely want to be the ones to cite those kind of leading edge theories. So this is a great opportunity to create a ton of publicity, and journalists are the same way, right? If a journalist is covering your industry and you're the one talking about, hey, here's what's going to happen in the next 5 years, and you're saying things that other people aren't even thinking about yet, it puts you in a very different category. So that's another great type of content. And next up, we're going to talk about, tutorials, teaching people how to do things. Give me 1 second. I got to turn off a heater here. It's getting a little toasty. There we go. All right. So what we're going to talk about now is some of the tutorials, and we're going to bring Vic up here in a second. But when we're doing tutorials as our content, this is another great way to show journalists that you really know what you're talking about, because it's showing people step by step how to do a thing. It's teaching them stuff that they need to know in that industry. Now, where a lot of people go wrong here is they try and keep it very surface level. They try to, we're going to go ahead and move that. They try to basically kind of hide back some of the information. They don't want to give everything away because they think, well, hey, if I tell people everything, then they're not going to need me. They're just going to take my information and use it for free and then just not need me as a consultant or as a business, whatever it is you do. And that's not really true. The reality is, I don't care how much stuff you tell somebody, they're not going to be able to replace you. Vic, who we're going to bring up here in a minute, is a just absolute genius developer. I've known him for, God, almost as long as I've known my wife, I think, at this point. But he could tell me literally everything he knows, and I will still never be the level of developer that he is, because that's just not my focus. I'm never going to put the same amount of energy into it. So if you show them exactly how to do it, you're showing them what you know. And the more that you can show them, the more impressive it looks. But also by doing that, you're also showing your potential customers, your potential clients that, hey, you guys really don't want to do this because here's all the stuff that goes into it. But in doing that, you're showing journalists your expertise. Now, I'm going to pull up a few screenshots here we've got of some of Vic's stuff. And one of them is he has a website that is absolutely loaded with tutorials for a particular software platform that applies to WordPress. This is a form system called Formidable Forms, but it's really so much more than that. You can actually build like full-blown SaaS apps with this. And he's probably got thousands of individual tutorials on there. And if I had to put a guess on it, I would say upwards of 60 to 70% of them are incredibly detailed, very, very comprehensive, right? Some of them, of course, are, hey, here's how to do this quick little thing. Super useful still, even though it's short. But the vast majority of his stuff is very, very comprehensive. And he goes deep, deep into exactly how it works, exactly step by step, how to do everything. And, everything's searchable within that website. He also puts out a lot of videos. He actually just shared one with me. This is a fairly technical one, but you can see by the flowchart, the complexity of what he digs into. And this goes into some of the enterprise software development that he's done over the years. And he breaks this down in a way that even if you're not a developer, you can understand it. And that's great because journalists, unless they are people in your industry who are writing for a trade pub, most of the journalists aren't going to understand your industry in the way that you do. So you have to be able to communicate all of that information comprehensively, but also in a way that the average person can understand it, right? And he does a great job of that. You know, you've got this video, you can see how complex that is, but when he explains it, it's very easy to understand, in my opinion. And then also he's got this community that he runs on Facebook where it's people who are developing these programs. They're doing stuff with formidable forms. And so this further reinforces his authority status as an expert on that particular thing, right? So what happens is now the journalist can come, they can see all his content, they can see his videos, they can see the tutorials, they can come into his community and they can see not only is he putting out this material, but all of these people are gravitating to him because of his expertise and they want to learn it. And there's this activity in there and that further builds the social proof. So we're going to go ahead and pull Vic up here in a second. Chrissy, go ahead and turn his camera on when he's ready. Vic,
hey,
good to see you, brother.
How are you?
I am outstanding, man. How about yourself?
I never had an introduction like that in my life, Jeremy. You're awesome.
Well, look, man, I mean, we've known each other forever and you've helped me out with a lot of development stuff, but I've seen the content that you've created. I've seen the things that you've done. And I mean, based on the content you've created, like you're actually aligned with the folks at Formidable Forms, like the people who developed the entire platform. So that says something about what you're doing and the type of content you're creating. So let's talk a little bit about the mindset of that. One in particular that I really want to hammer on first is how you're taking it from this very esoteric and complex topic and breaking it down in a way that the average person can understand it.
Well, in order to explain that, you have to understand a little bit about my background. I come from Fortune 500 information technology, where I specialized in software application development for many years, working for companies like Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, JP Morgan Bank, AT&T. And I was a director of IT at Pfizer, and I had a staff, and I would run major software implementations in the area of several $1 million for a project. In fact, the last strategic plan I put together was a 2-year budget for IT at $5.5 million. This is my background. This is where I come from. Now, when I got laid off from Pfizer, it was just natural for me to start coding in an area that I had interest in. I'd always been a database programmer from the Oracle world, building very complex relational database management systems. And when I met Formidable Forms over a decade ago, I fell in love with the product because of the flexibility that it provided me in WordPress to create the kinds of applications that I know how to develop. Well, most people that come up through WordPress start with building websites, and you start with the metadata structure in the databases, and you really don't get too deeply into relational database management system. But yet, WordPress is built on top of MySQL and MariaDB and Percona and some of these other relational database systems that can do some remarkable things if you know how to use them. So I want to teach WordPress developers how to take advantage of the tools that they already have. They have a toolbox that can go so deep. I built the codex for Formidable Forms. It's something that even Strategy 11 does not have, where I have captured every single public function and hook.
I forgot about that. Let's back up on that for a second and explain what that is. So I don't want to go too deep into the tech stuff, but let's talk about what those are, and then we'll talk about what you built as a result of that, because that's a perfect example that a journalist would look at that and be like, oh my God, like this guy knows his stuff.
Well, it's the only codex in the world, as far as I'm aware of, for Formidable Forms.
So explain what a codex is, though, to people who are non-developers.
A codex is a dictionary, basically. It's something that if you encounter a function or word, like if you're developing in PHP and you come across a function you want to use, you type it into Google and it brings up a page on PHP website. Well, I have that functionality built into Formidable Mastermind's website for any hook that you can encounter in Formidable Forms. And there are over 600 hooks that are not documented on a Formidable website that I've got information on in my codex.
So here's the awesome thing about that. That statement alone, if you went to a journalist and you pitched them about using Formidable Forms to, scale your business, to manage your business, whatever, like there's a million things that you can do with Formidable, right? So we're not going to get into all the tech of that. But if you were to go to a journalist and talk about, hey, all these businesses are looking for ways to become more efficient, to become more, track stuff more effectively, manage their workflow, whatever. And if you went to them and said, look, I've done XYZ and I've got the entire dictionary basically for this entire thing that the developer of the platform hasn't even created yet, right? That puts you in an entirely different class.
Well, I hope it's a good class to be in.
It absolutely is, but it highlights, an example of using this content, right? Because when you can reach out to a journalist and say that, it shows them that you really know what you're talking about. Now, especially like, let's say in a hypothetical situation, if I was to go pitch Vic to a journalist, I would, that's an angle that I would absolutely take. But the thing you have to be careful with here is you also have to be careful not to kind of shit on the platform, because just because the platform doesn't have everything documented doesn't mean that they've done anything wrong necessarily. Like there's only so many hours in the day, and that's a lot of information. So in a case like that, you would have to approach it in a very humble way. Like, hey, it's a great platform. They've got all these things, and I know they're always working to improve it. So I went and found the area that they weren't really, able to improve yet. And I solved it because I already had that problem. So I solved it for myself, and now I'm sharing it with others, right? And that's a great way to position yourself as an expert while still lifting up the platform that you're working with. And it puts you in a very different class. And a journalist, of course, is going to see that, love that, and they're going to say, yeah, absolutely, this guy's an expert. And that's something you've done a great job at.
Well, thanks. Jeremy,
you were about to say?
You are so eloquent in the way that you're expressing this. I really appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. My pleasure. Before we move on to the next segment, if anybody has any questions they'd like to pop in and ask, Chrissy can go ahead and let you guys pop in real quick. I'll take a second or two because I know we've got a bit of a delay between us talking and it actually showing up out there in Facebook and YouTube, and well, probably not Facebook apparently based on the comments, but all the other platforms that we're streaming to. But we'll take a second or two here. And in fact, Chrissy, while we're waiting, why don't you go ahead and drop, I know we've got links to Vic's website and group. Why don't we drop those into the chat thread here? And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next segment for now. If you guys have any questions, I want to talk to Vic about kind of how he's created content like this. Just go ahead and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And then we'll pop back over there. So for now, we'll go ahead and roll on to the next segment. Vic, thanks for joining us today, brother. And I will talk to you soon.
I appreciate it. I'll talk to you later, bud.
All right. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about what happens when you publicly lie about a provable fact. Now, who am I talking about today? It's a politician. That probably shouldn't surprise anyone. This is Dan Crenshaw, former Navy SEAL, current U.S. congressman, and overall shitty human being. What happened here was he got into a little argument, little altercation on X, aka Twitter, where somebody had accused him of taking money for something, and he flat out denied it. Problem is, if something is provable, as it is in any kind of election donation, campaign contribution, stuff like that, he was actually, I don't know if charged is the right word, but in investigating the campaign, they found some things that he had done wrong. He had accepted money that he should not have taken. And it's all documented. So it's pretty stupid to make a claim that you did not do a thing when there is documented evidence that you did do that thing. And he ended up having to pay a fine as a result of doing that thing. So there's no way that he did not know about that. Now, let's talk about the public relations outcome of a situation like this, because obviously this does not only happen with politicians, it also happens with entrepreneurs. So this is not the first lie or shitty behavior from Crenshaw. This and other recent statements were kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Now, when he first got into Congress, he was generally widely respected, among the conservative circles. And now he's pretty widely hated. There's a lot of talk of him being primaried. He just doesn't have the support that he used to have, and he's probably not going to be around after the next election. So, in a nutshell, don't be like Dan. Don't be stupid. Don't lie. Just be honest, and you're not going to have these kinds of problems. While we're on the subject of politicians, we'll talk about what can go wrong when you schedule social media posts and how that can potentially damage public perception of your brand. Now, what am I talking about in this case? Well, we're talking about Governor Hochul, where she had these posts scheduled to be posted about how safe and wonderful the New York subway system is. She got her little selfies here, talking with some folks, riding the subway and all of that. And this was all pre-scheduled. They had done the photo shoot. They posted, or they put them into whatever platform they used to schedule them. And they went live shortly after this woman was burned to death on the train. So it's a really bad look. It makes you look very tone deaf. Definitely creates serious problems. Her brand, she was not really very, very well respected at that point to begin with, but this just decimated anything that was left for her. Now, I understand the concept of scheduling social media posts, and in a lot of cases, that does make sense. It does, create efficiency, scalability, especially if you've got a steady stream of what's called evergreen content that's going to be good pretty much indefinitely, right? If you're talking about, a particular approach to something, like how things are done in your industry, and it's not like a super technical thing, so it might change in a few years, right? Then that's the kind of content that can be good for a long time. Whereas if you're talking about, like I mentioned Carol's tweets earlier in regards to the BOI thing, that would be something that's not evergreen. So if you've got good evergreen content, that can certainly be scheduled, but just be careful what you're scheduling, because if it is something that's more time sensitive, then maybe that's not going to work so well. And you can run into problems like this. And then that also allows you to focus on natively posting the trending topics, right? The things people are talking about, the things that just pop up out of the blue. Now, what you have to do to avoid stupid things like this happening is just keep your eye on the news, keep your eye on social media, and look at what's going on. If something significant happens in your industry or even in the overall world, right? Take a look at what you've got scheduled. Make sure that you're not going to have something posted that comes off as very tone deaf based on new events, right? There was an article, I don't have the screenshot in here, it looks like, but there was an article I had posted about back in the day. I think this was back around the same time as that other article that I shared from SEJ, where I was talking about what to do if your rankings crash. And I had used this picture of an airplane just raging in flames, crashing. Unfortunately, it was the same day that the Ethiopian's airline flight 302 had crashed and burned, and lots of people died, right? I hadn't done anything wrong, but a lot of people got pissed off. A lot of people, blasted me on social media about it being insensitive, all of that. Like, these are the kinds of things that potentially happen when things are prepared ahead of time. So you just have to be very careful that what you're putting out there is not going to kind of conflict with anything that's going on in the news and present you in a bad light. And, the worst the worse the event is, the worse the blowback can be for you. There was an example. I can't for the life of me remember the details. I'll try and pull it out of my brain here, but there was something that Entenmann's did. I'll look it up later and I'll drop it in the group. But there was something Entenmann's did, the donut company. And this was right around the time of that Casey Anthony trial. And they jumped on a hashtag thinking that it was just some trending thing, but it was actually about Casey Anthony murdering her baby. And Entenmann's jumped on it to promote their business. And that did not go well for them. The backlash was intense. There were some boycotts of the brand for a while. It definitely impacted them in a huge way. So these are the kinds of things that, you have to be very careful of. And when it happens, you want to look at what exactly is going on, right? Because this can quickly turn into a PR crisis. So the first thing that you have to do is take a step back and evaluate the true impact. You're always going to have people pissed off on social media about something. So you have to look at, is this just a few pissed off people? Are these people who are just pissed off about everything? Or is this a legitimate problem? Did I really screw up? Do I have something to apologize for, right? So is it a few loud voices, or is it a substantial kind of groundswell of people who are upset about this? If the answer is no, let me back up. We want to look at if the attacks are rational as well, because look, if you've spent any time on social media, you know that not everyone is rational. People are going to lose their shit over all kinds of stuff. I could cite dozens of examples off the top of my head, but the bottom line is, even if it's not rational, it doesn't mean that you're in the clear, because that can snowball pretty quickly. There was actually a story that I'm thinking about a couple days ago where I cannot remember the names of the people, but there was Kamala Harris was doing something with swearing in of somebody, and the guy had a cane in his hand, and he was holding the Bible for her to swear in on. And people completely lost their shit about it, claiming that he was just being, rude and racist and this, that, and the other thing because he wouldn't shake her hand, right? He's holding a cane that he's using to stand up with because he had a stroke, and he's got a Bible in his other hand. It's physically impossible for him to shake her hand. But the internet mob blew up and just attacked all over the place. If you guys are on X, you probably saw that. And to this day, this was, I don't know, a day or two ago, people are still complaining about it and not really looking at the facts. So it doesn't have to be rational for it to blow up like that. The McDonald's coffee story is another example of that kind of thing. A lot of people think that the lady was just dumb, but the reality is the way the story was spread in the media was that she was dumb and this, that, and the other, but the coffee was actually heated up to well over 180 degrees. So a story can get out there and snowball in a very huge way before you get a chance to control it. So just because it's not rational doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything about it, right? You do have to get out there and be proactive in some cases, even if it's not rational. So then you have to look at, how are people reacting, or how are they attacking rather? So if they're just attacking you on social media, that's one thing. If they're coming to your reviews, right? Maybe they go to your Google business profile, or they go to your reviews on Facebook or Yelp or wherever, and they start blasting you in the reviews there, then you've got a very different situation. If it's social media, then it's a matter of responding. You may have to lock down your comments for a little while, but you can engage directly there. You can reach out to local media, stuff like that. If it's in the reviews, you're going to want to lock down your reviews if possible. I cannot remember off the top of my head if that's doable in Google these days. I know Facebook you can. I'm not sure exactly which platforms have which options, but in some cases, you may have the ability to turn off reviews entirely for a period of time. A lot of times, these platforms will have, AI algorithms looking at what's going on, and it will look at, is there an unusual level of activity? Are people just suddenly slamming this company at an exceptional rate, right, outside of the normal? Then in those cases, the platforms will usually keep a closer eye on it. They'll start to suppress those irrelevant reviews, people who are just attacking it because of something they saw on social media. Usually those can get cleaned up pretty quickly. It's not usually the end of the world, but you do have to be proactive about it. And you will generally have to reach out to, through their official support channels to get some help cleaning some of that up. But it is a thing that you have to be aware of. And then as far as the media, once the media starts covering it, then it can blow up exponentially. So it's a really good idea to start reaching out to the media, or have your publicist, if you have one, start reaching out to the media on your behalf. Because what will happen is, if you get the story to them first and they understand exactly what's really going on, they're less likely to cover it in a negative and incorrect way. And this really highlights the importance of building those relationships, or working with a publicist who already has those relationships early on as well. It's a very different situation if you're reaching out in the middle of a crisis versus, somebody like me picks up the phone and calls the journalist who I happen to know and we talk weekly, right? It's a very different situation. So proactive is best, but in the midst of it, you want to be as quick and comprehensive as you could possibly be. And then let's talk about making a public statement, right? It's going to be a case-by-case basis, and there's not an easy answer here. But in some cases, it may make sense to do a public apology, right? If you did something wrong, you want to come up and do a public apology. You want to say, hey, this is what happened. This wasn't our intent. This is what we wanted to do, but here's how it turned out, something like that. But genuinely apologize. Don't make the mistake that I see so many people make, and they're like, oh, well, we did this thing and apparently some people are bothered by it, so we're sorry if you're offended. Like, that is the worst, most condescending approach, and it's going to backfire in your face. It's never going to work out for you. So if it comes to a point where you have to make an apology, then do it authentically, and do it deeply, right? You want to genuinely apologize in a way that the people who were hurt, if they were legitimately hurt, will feel like they were heard. So that being said, we're going to roll into the Q&A session here for a minute. If we've got anyone who has any questions they'd like to pop up, Chrissy, you can go ahead and pull them in here. And I'll just kind of take a second here. We got anybody? I know we're running a little bit quiet this first week back from the holidays for a lot of y'all. So, all right. If we don't have any questions, we will go ahead and move on to Jeremy's PR PSA. And this is based on a little mistake that I made earlier this week. So in the midst of chaos, always be on guard for tunnel vision so that it doesn't sabotage your efforts. Now, what am I talking about here? I had a TV segment lined up for a client, and I was managing 3 different time zones. I'm in one time zone. The TV network's in a completely different time zone, like 14 hours ahead, by the way. And the client was in a different time zone behind me. And they had recently changed their entire workflow. So there's a link and a password that they will usually give you for getting into the portal to do this remote television interview. Usually I would receive it a few days in advance, at least, if not earlier, right? That did not happen this time. So I reached out a few times leading up to that, but of course this was throughout the holidays. So they were on kind of a skeleton crew. And the day of the interview, now mind you, they're 14 hours ahead. So while it's our daytime, they're all sleeping. So I did not get a hold of anybody there until well into the evening. And I think it was about an hour and a half, 2 hours before the actual interview was the first time I heard back from them on that day. And they're like, oh yeah, well, with our new workflow, we're just changing it to where you're going to get the link and the password 15 minutes before the interview. Not a good situation. There's a lot of reasons why that is less than ideal, but look, they're going to do what they're going to do. You can't change a media outlet's workflow. So as we got closer, I started to get a bit nervous because we still didn't have that. And of course, I always want my clients to go in and pop in ahead of time so they can make sure all the technical stuff's working correctly. And I actually got a bit of tunnel vision here. And now I'm focused on getting the link and the password. And at that point, it slipped my mind that the client's in another time zone. So I'm blowing up the producers over here like every few minutes towards the end. But meanwhile, I'm looking at my time zone, not his, which is actually an hour before us. So things got a bit messy. Didn't affect the client, didn't hurt the client in any way, but I kind of felt like an ass. I was blowing up every contact I had at that outlet. And this is the kind of thing that, it sometimes happens. In my case, worked out fine in the end. And it actually gave us some insight as to how to eliminate this problem from happening in the future. But it's really easy for things to go wrong when you get tunnel vision. You start focusing on one thing, and then other things just kind of blur off into the background. So just be aware. The more chaotic a situation is, take a step, take a breath, step back and look at what's going on. Look at all the details. Just try to maintain calm in the chaos, and everything that you do in that situation is going to be a lot easier, a lot better. So that's a wrap for today, guys. Look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. I do want to point out we've got the PR strategy workbook that we've developed for you guys. If you hit that with your QR code, it should take you straight to our e-commerce platform where you can pick it up. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. We're going to be talking about some awesome things here. Well, awesome things, lessons to learn about some shitty situations, frankly. We've got some stuff with Google coming up and their ongoing PR crisis. We've got a few things coming up on how to find the right journalists, how to land your first column at a trade publication, and a lot of other cool topics. We're going to be bringing in some cool guests as well. So we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.